Cover that with polythene and then a piece of this capillary matting on the top. That is always kept wet, so then the plants can suck up their own water as they require it. But the ideal thing is to pot them up straight away. Now, first of all, give them a really good watering, and then you'll find that these plants just slip out of the modules very easily. Now, I'm going to pot them into 10 centimetre, that's 4-inch pots, and I'm using coir compost. Now, with coir, you don't need to do any firming, just overfill the pots like that. Give it a good tap on the bench, a good watering in afterwards, and they'll soon be away. Now, you can also buy plants in these plastic bubbles, and if you do that, it's absolutely essential to get them out of the plastic bubble straight away. And these two have their own little root system, but you'll notice with these that there's a plastic net round there. Don't, for heaven's sake, try and fiddle to get that plastic net off. It is perfectly all right left on. Just pot them up as soon as you can. Now, all these plants will need protecting in the greenhouse. But if you haven't got a greenhouse, a cold frame will do perfectly well. It doesn't need any heating at this time of the year. And if you haven't got a cold frame, well, get a strong cardboard box, paint it white, put a piece of rigid plastic over the top, and that should suffice. And if we do get a really hard late frost, well, you can pick the whole shebang up and take it into the house and protect it overnight that way. There's a wonderful feeling of optimism at this time of the year, isn't there? Well, last week, Wray met 84-year-old Gwyneth Jones, whose love of life is reflected in her garden that nestles on the Menai Straits.
Gwyneth Jones moved to Anglesey 25 years ago to a garden that resembled a wilderness. After much clearing and replanting, she has created a gardener's paradise with plants of interest all through the year. I think you've got an ideal location here. You're right down by the Menai Straits. It is quite mild, yet we've got a backdrop of mountains covered in snow.
And the wind, when it comes off the snow, is a biting cold wind.
Would you say that gardening is your first passion?
No, it's a third.
What are your first two?
First, dogs. Second, hill walking. And third, alas, gardening. And dogs would always vote for hill walking.
We've got some real sun-loving shrubs here.
Yes, well, Prosantheria is a mild climate plant, isn't it?
And it's a superb specimen. I don't think I've seen one so tall.
No. Have you crushed the leaves? Because they've got a lovely smell.
No, I haven't. Oh, yeah, it's really sort of minty, isn't it?
It is, it is.
The real treat, the real sun lover up there is the Sephora. In flower as well. I mean, it's not often that you see that in Britain.
Well, I think I planted it in the wrong place. You can see a rather ugly cut-off branch there because it was obstructing the view and was getting too big for the site.
Well, it seems to be doing very well, though. I mean,
Yes.
it seems to have survived the pruning.
Yes, I think it has, fortunately for me.
It's got those interesting pea-shaped leaves, hasn't it?
Yes, and the flowers, when they're fully out, are such a bright colour, aren't they?
I see you're also growing a range of fruit crops as well.
Yes, well, it's nice to be able to harvest your own. Blueberries, autumn raspberries and the summer raspberries. But I'm thinking of doing away with the tall summer raspberries.
Why is that?
So much more trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Pruning them down in the autumn when your fingers are cold, tying them up again. There's non-stop work with those. These you just cut down in February and home and dry.
Well, you've also got some what looks like blueberries in here.
Yes, these require different conditions, a much more acid soil.
Mm-hmm.
pH was just over 6, and I have reduced it to 5.75 or something like that.
So how did you set about actually acidifying the soil?
Flowers of sulphur and ferrous sulphate.
And where would you get those from?
Well, I usually buy my fertilisers wholesale, and I share an order with another friend.
I see. So that keeps the cost down.
It keeps the cost down in a big way.
Why have you let your gooseberries grow so high?
They have been made to grow to that height and flat against the wall, so they're so much easier to pick. Nice. You don't have prickly hands or have to burrow in amongst the bush to get the fruit.
So it saves an aching back?
It saves an aching back, and when you get to my age, that's a lot.
Well, you've also got some clematis in amongst the currant bushes.
Well, those came from necessity, really. They were too big in places in the garden, so I split some and I dug some others up. And they do help pollination. They attract a lot of insects to pollinate the other fruit in the garden. And by the way, 4 arrived this morning.
Oh, well, better give you a hand getting them in. Tell me a bit about the clematis that we're planting.
Lazarstern. It has one of the longest flowering periods of all, light mauvey-coloured flowers.
Right, now it's important to have a good hole for planting clematis.
Yes, planting them deeper than their thing, in case you get clematis wilt. And then if you do get clematis wilt, you hope new shoots will grow from the base.
Right. Now, what are you putting in the water?
Disinfectant.
Now, why do we need to put that in the ground?
Because of my little light-coloured dog who loves bone meal.
Ah.
And the smell of the disinfectant puts him off. If I didn't do it, I've seen him with a plant in his mouth, dirty face, dirty feet, handing me the plant and eaten bone meal.
Looking around the garden, many of the trees and shrubs are very well pruned and cared for. I think that you like pruning, don't you?
Well, I like to see shrubs in the good form and good shape and with good vigour, and I think pruning does all that for them. My young brother swears that if I get to heaven or elsewhere, I'll have a pair of secateurs in my hand.
Well, one of my great passions is my Alpine house. And this little miniature rock garden has been a joy since January. There's been something in flower right the way through, and it'll go on like that right the way through the year. They're not difficult plants to grow either. You don't need any heat at all. In fact, the ventilators are kept open all the time. They need very little watering and virtually no fertiliser. What you must have is a very strong staging, because this compost is really quite heavy. And it's very gritty too, because alpines must have really good drainage. And just look at the lovely range of plants that you can grow. They're very diverse, our alpines, with lots of different colours and different shapes of flowers. And some of these lovely rounded hummocks look really good. Now, the rock that I've used here is called tufa, and it's made all the time by limestone streams. Now, when it arrives to you, it looks something like this. And what you need to do is to give it a really good jet of water from a hose pipe, and that will wash out some of the lime and leave you with lovely craggy shapes like this. It's also very soft. So what you can do is to make holes in it with a screwdriver, or you can use a masonry drill if you like. And then you can actually plant that up with tiny rock plants like this little saxifrage. Now, you might have to sort out an alpine specialist for plants this small, but they can go in there like that. You'll need sometimes a little bit of extra compost in there. And then push them in nice and firm. And perhaps put in just a little bit of extra rock around. You can break this up with your fingers just to hold them in. And that will then need a good watering, but that will grow quite happily there, provided you just water it from time to time. And, of course, it'll produce some good flowers too. Now, over the other side of the greenhouse, I grow alpine plants in pots plunged into this sand. Some of these, of course, can go outside during the summer. And I love plants like these auriculas. Aren't they beautiful things? They were very popular in the 18th century when they were grown by what were known then as florist societies. And these societies were formed to promote the growing of specialist plants, things like tulips and pinks and auriculas. Now, some of those societies are still thriving today, as I discovered when I visited the Ancient Society of York Florists as they prepared for their annual show.
The Primula auricula was grown by the monks during the 14th and 15th centuries in this country for medicinal purposes, but the actual florist ones, the ones that we grow, came across with the Huguenots when they were thrown out of Northern Europe as a result of religious persecution. They've been grown 16th, 17th and 18th century.
Symmetry, form and freshness is what we're looking for in auriculas. The cartwheel effect, as round as possible in the centre, and that's a little bit ovate, so a little squeeze like that, and it comes round.
Small but perfect. It's nice shape. Small but perfect. It took 20 years to find the society. It's a secret society. It was kept over in Lancashire mainly and Yorkshire. And you just didn't know where the shows were. And then when you find out, it gets into the blood and you're hooked for life. You're hooked for life. It's a marvellous hobby. Nice. The bottom pips going over. The bottom pip shoots going over. Got it out a little bit. Both Barbara.
Yeah.
That one came from the back.
Yeah.
So, Harry, what exactly are you looking for?
Looking for perfection, which I don't think we'll find. But this exhibit here is as near as we can get in this class. A flat bloom. Each flower is called a pip. Perfectly flat pip. A paste which is not see-through, is a solid body.
Now, the paste is the white bit in
the
middle.
white farina. And the width of the paste should be twice that width to the edge of the petal.
And do you think that anybody's ever going to breed the perfect auriculus?
Perfect one, there's a lot trying, but there's no... I can't see it ever becoming the perfect. Disappointment if it did.
Those chaps grow some wonderful florist tulips too. Well, there's nothing particularly unusual about my tulips, except perhaps that I grow them as very temporary spring bedding. I pot them up in the autumn, putting round about 5 bulbs to a pot, and then I grow them on in a patch behind the greenhouse. And as you know, if you leave tulips in over the winter, you're likely to lose quite a few of them. So I leave mine in the pots, but it is essential to feed them when they're in flower and indeed afterwards too. So what I do is to put in one of these slow-release fertiliser pellets down into the compost, and that should do the trick. Now, don't forget to water it from time to time, and then just refill the hole. And as soon as they've finished flowering, they can come out, go back in their place behind the greenhouse and be allowed to die down naturally. And then they're lifted and stored dry over the winter. And that way, I've managed to keep them for very many years. Well, next to them, I'm going to grow some gladioli. Now, you know that gladioli, if they're planted out in rows, look like soldiers, and that's pretty awful in the borders. But if you plant them in a group, they make a very fine herbaceous plant. Now, I've dug the hole about 6 inches deep, and I'm going to put in a couple of inches of gravel. And it is worthwhile doing this because the base plate of the corm is the bit that is likely to rot. So if you have heavy soil, this will prevent any problems. And you just put a little clump of them in, and then put a cane in the middle That will, of course, remind you where they are, and it can serve as a support for the whole clump afterwards. Cover them up, and that will make a very fine plant. And of course, people get really passionate about these too, and there is a society for Gladioli as well. But Angela Dougall used her passion as an interior designer to create a tiny London garden with a very personal touch.
I've lived in the house for 10 years, but the garden wasn't in existence. I didn't own anything. In fact, the garden belonged to the house behind, and the soil level was actually up to about here. So when I did finally acquire the garden in the last, I suppose, 4 years, I had to dig myself out of the house and into the garden before I could start to do anything. And I could have decided to have a sunken garden and dug out all the soil in the garden, but I wasn't that inclined. One skip load was enough. And then from then onwards, I suppose I thought, well, how am I going to get from this level to the garden level? This is the existing level. And I suppose I felt that with the stone slabs that I was acquiring, I could make 2 little steps and then do another little level, and partially the soil from here went over there. That's how I got the 3 levels. The main requirement that I had of the garden was that it provided me with a sunbathing space. That was essential, so I sort of built this very, very tiny lawn so that I could lie down on it. It's just about my size. I wanted a seating area so that I could actually eat here, have breakfast or whatever else. So I obviously cantilevered this off so I can just sort of tuck myself under there and put whatever food I have and drink. And I also wanted a place to sit, read a book, just very, very briefly perhaps, when I had a sort of coffee break. A lot of people ask me, why did I choose mind your own business for the garden? Because obviously it's a very predominant feature. But I sort of, actually, I didn't select it. I can't even remember how it got into the garden. It completely smothers weeds. Hardly anything grows up between it. And I recall saying that the plants were just waving and not drowning, but I have to say that this year a lot of them are actually surfing, and I think by next year I'm going to have to chop it back a little bit. Each year I do actually try to think of a new way of doing something. So, for example, this year I've decided to allow it to be very soft, very misty, with blues, with mauves and off-white plants. I think the corners in this garden are very, very dark. In winter, it's an incredibly dark and damp sort of garden, and so I've tried to counteract that by actually putting mirrors around the garden. As you can see, they're sort of strategically placed. They direct the sunlight back into the darkest of corners, but they also have a couple of other jobs to do as well. One of them is to actually direct the sunlight back up to the house and to me, sitting there waiting for the sunbeams. And the other thing that they have to do is actually to, I suppose, to provide ambiguity in the garden. I like to feel when I step out that I'm seeing another plane. I'm looking one way, but I'm seeing something else. And I find that very interesting. I suppose this will make everybody raise their hands in horror, but actually to come out here at night and to sit on a sort of warm night and listen to the munching of snails and slugs, you can hear their little jaws chewing. And actually, I like it. I actually like sharing my garden with this. However mad that might sound, to me, it's a pleasure. Shoot me now, you know.